Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast is brought to you by Holland, Harn & Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland, Harn & Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm joined today by Lauren Roberts. Lauren is the founder of Mumming, a social enterprise that brings together other self-employed parents for co-working sessions and events. What's unique about Lauren is how she's dedicated to growing a connected community of parents to support a better work-life balance and bring back the social elements of office life that are often missing when working from home. And be sure to listen to the end, where Lauren describes why the ability to bounce ideas off of someone sitting next to you cannot be underestimated. So, whether you're interested to know more about co-working spaces or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Welcome, Lauren Roberts, to the Inside Kingston podcast. Lauren, I'm really excited about this conversation because I know your business supports a generation of flexible working mums who want to do well in both their family life and their business life. And I think that there are many useful lessons from this, which our listeners can learn a lot from. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So
Sure.
Where did you grow up?
So, hello, I'm originally from the wonder that is Frimley. It's a small town, not very far away, just down on the M3 in Surrey. I just moved up to Twickenham. It was 3 years ago now.
Excellent. Okay. And did you go to university? And if so, what did you study?
I did. I went to Southampton University and studied psychology just because I didn't know what else to do and I found it absolutely fascinating. So, yes, I have a degree in psychology.
And could you tell us a little bit about your career journey before you set up your business?
So I graduated in 2005, found myself working in marketing because in my last year at university, I was a campus brand manager for Yellow Pages. I don't know, I guess they're still around, but that was how I sort of first stepped into marketing and found that I enjoyed the sort of psychological aspect of it, so understanding what affected people's behavior, whether they would decide to buy something or not, how the design affects things. So I'm quite analytical, and that was kind of how I got into marketing, I suppose, and then ended up working for several different agencies in London between 2005 and 2012, and worked on various different campaigns, like for the National Trust, hotel brand, Mercedes, all sorts. So that was how I got into it, first of all.
That's fascinating. And bringing this conversation a little bit more to the present. Now, I appreciate that you have your own business as a service business, but could you tell us firstly a little bit about your business, Mumming, as it stands today?
Yeah, so it's actually going through a bit of a name change at the moment. So it's called Mumming, which is basically because when I returned to work, when my son, who's now 2, I returned to work when he was 7 months, and I work from home. I was working for Skype at the time, remotely.
Okay.
And being, working from home is difficult anyway, I think, in terms of the isolation that you have to deal with. Staying motivated, staying productive, it requires an incredible amount of self-discipline. And, I think some people see it as a sort of easy option that you're sitting at home in your pajamas, watching TV, sending the odd email, which is really not like that at all. Not if you do it day in, day out for, years at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing that for, I think it was about 2.5 years before I had my son, and then returned to work after about 7 months of maternity leave. And yeah, I just found it incredibly hard because all of the sort of opportunities that I would have had to socialize before becoming a mum and, in the evenings and weekends, obviously looking after a young baby, that wasn't really possible. So it was really that sort of need that I felt that there must be other people sitting at home feeling the same way, feeling isolated, wanting adult conversation, but, struggling to get out. So that's what led me to basically set up Mumming, which was a way of getting together work from home mums in the same situation. But yeah, just recently it's sort of evolved into more of a parent focused community. So yeah, the co-working sessions are now called Parent Village.
Mm-hmm. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a simple concept, but it's quite hard to execute. So basically, we use spaces that are typically not busy during the week. So on a weekday morning, a pub or a hotel, you will have the parents working in one room, and then in a separate room, we'll have kids, babies from 3 months to 4 years old. So basically preschoolers in another room with nannies, obviously, and lots of toys and activities. So yeah, the concept is basically to create a community for people who work from home or who are maybe starting something new, starting their own business or going freelance. Because I think the hardest thing about doing it is the isolation and not having other people to talk to. And especially when you're a parent and you also may struggle with childcare because it's astronomically expensive and you have to commit to certain days and times, which when you don't know your working schedule is really, really tricky to do.
That's really interesting. And I'm sure that flexibility is appealing to your customers and a lot of folks that perhaps are not aware of the fact that you guys are around. So that sounds like a really interesting business there, Lauren. Could you tell me a couple of things, actually, that I want to unpeel from what you said? Because you obviously have an inside view onto some of the, I guess, common mistakes or common myths around working from home. You've shared one of those already, which is that isolation. I mean, are there any other things that you see and hear about when folks start using your services and participating in Parent Village, which they then share with you, which you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think like this is a trap that a lot of us who work from home fall into, is that you sort of assume that you also should be doing things like laundry, like washing up, like it's staring at you in the face. There's there's always household chores to be done, and I'm sure it's not every case that you're expected to do it, but sometimes you just naturally find yourself doing it because you think, well, I'm being efficient, I'm putting a load of laundry on whilst getting my work done. But it's very hard to, if you're working a job that you've got to hit deadlines just as any other job. Just because you're working at home, somebody wouldn't come up to you in an office and say, hey, can you just put a load of laundry on and do some ironing and clean up that worktop over there? Like, you just wouldn't. Yeah, so that's a hard thing to deal with, and that's partly why I set up the co-working sessions. Is I think you need to get out and be in a different space at least some of the time that you're working.
And how does it work? Do folks go onto your website and then book in to a session, and they have a certain amount of hours that they book in for? What's the logistics around it from the consumer looking for the service look like?
Yeah, so at the moment, so I launched the concept as it is at the moment with the co-working and the attached creche in February. So it's been running for 10 months now. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's still early days. So at the moment, you can book into just on a drop-in basis per session. But hopefully in January, either January or February, we'll be launching a monthly membership. So you'll be able to get sort of better rates if you're able to commit, for a month at a time, and different packages. So yeah, it's there'll always be a drop-in option though, because that's a key part of what I want to offer is the flexibility and the flexible childcare as well.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Now, did I hear correctly that you've begun a crowdfunding project for your business? And if so, could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yes. I don't know how you heard that, but yes, just a few days ago, I've literally just sort of pulling together what I'm hoping will be a round of crowdfunding that will enable us to basically scale from what we have now, which is one regular location in Teddington, to enable us to launch across Twickenham, Richmond, and Esher, and also beyond that. So there's a certain amount of cost that's obviously involved in running each session, and until we have enough members paying monthly, there's sort of a bit of a gap that I need to fill, and I'm hoping that crowdfunding can help with that to enable the concept to grow.
Fantastic. So exciting times ahead.
Yeah, I hope so.
Fantastic. Lauren, I'll tell you actually how I heard about it, because that segues us nicely into a different. I actually saw your Instagram live feed where you mentioned this. Now, of course, you and I are connected on social media, but what I've noticed about your presence on social media is that you're really active with interacting with the people in your network. And, for the benefit of our listeners, could you share with us your thought process on using social media to maintain professional relationships, but also to potentially attract new business?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really interesting, because basically I've finished my day job at the end of October, and I'm now a freelance digital marketing consultant. So I'm literally building my own website at the moment, and will be sort of advising on social media. But I think it's such an amazing tool when used the right way. You can meet people and create connections that you would have had a chance to. And I think if you approach it in the right way, because it's very easy to get sucked into comparison, looking at what other people are doing, not feeling good enough. But I think if you use it in the right way to engage, and I just think if one person saw my Instagram TV and got something from it, then that's a win. I'll try not to look at the numbers too much, though obviously it's it's always tempting. But yeah, I think it's an incredibly powerful tool, and really exciting times, really, because it's only really sort of become widely available in the last few years.
Lauren, that actually speaks to something that we briefly touched on at the beginning of this conversation, which is the fact that you do some work with clients on a one-to-one basis. So could you tell us a little bit about that too?
Sure. So it's something I've just started doing literally in the last month. So I can basically understand what people are hoping to achieve if they're setting up, maybe they're going freelance, or they have been for a while, or their social media isn't quite what they want it to be, or they're launching a new business. So with the experience that I've gained, I guess, in growing my own personal Instagram and the Mumming Club Instagram, basically taking all of that knowledge and just advising people on what I've found works, because the platform's always changing, but I think there's sort of ways you can do things that really get across your message and help you connect with the right people. So yeah, I've just started doing that literally in the last few weeks, so it's brand new, really exciting though. It's funny because when my job finished, it wasn't something that I chose. My contract came to an end, and I was quite upset about it. But actually, it's turned out to be really exciting, and I'm really loving what I'm working on now. So there you go. Take the positive really cool from the negative, right?
Absolutely, that's the way to do it. Yeah, Lauren, what I find really interesting about this concept is how you're matching a need, which is childcare, with the facilities and the community around creating a workspace that folks that are working from home typically are missing from their life. But on the creche bit in particular, I can imagine that there's a lot of trust that goes into that, even though the parent might be in a separate room. Could you just tell us a little bit about how you think about sourcing that childcare and creating that environment for the child so that the parent can actually concentrate on doing their work?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's definitely something that I really strongly believe in terms of if you come along with your child, we have in the creche 3 months to 4 years old. And I know, obviously for some of the parents that come along, it's the first time they've actually left their child, with someone outside of their family. And that's a huge thing. And I definitely know that because I've been through that myself with my son, only a year or so ago. So yeah, I definitely think it's a huge responsibility, and I want to, a huge part of what we do is making sure parents have that peace of mind if they do bring their little one along with them, that they can relax and know that they're well cared for. And it's probably, to be honest, been the most difficult part of what I do. And some people have said to me, "Oh, why don't you just run co-working without a creche?" And I absolutely could do that, but that's not what it's about, because it's about breaking down the barriers so that parents don't have to, so that childcare isn't a barrier to being able to come along, to being able to start a business, to being able to connect with other people. So basically, I work with an agency that going to manage it for me. They're going to bring in the toys, ensure that the toys are all age appropriate, depending on what age kids are booked in. They're all qualified childcare professionals, first aid qualified, and so I bring my son along with me every week. So he's 2 years, 3 months now, and he's an absolute ball of energy. So I know that if he is entertained and happy, that I'm confident that other kids will be too. Before, the way I was running it, I was sort of booking. There was still absolutely professionally qualified childcare, people with a lot of experience, but I was sort of booking them myself and managing the bookings manually, which is just not really sustainable, or it wouldn't allow me to grow the business to the vision I have, to basically being able to reach more parents around the country. So I'm really excited. It's a really sort of interesting time in the business, sort of taking a big leap of faith. I'm sure people listening who've been through that can appreciate what it feels like, but it's exciting and scary, but it just feels like, for me, I have to do it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. And as a parent of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old myself, I can totally relate with that business model. And I must say, Lauren, from my perspective, I haven't seen this before. Now, it might be that I'm just busy at work and I'm not paying attention to the world as I should. But this seems to me like not only a novel concept, but one that is absolutely right for the generation we live in, where both mums and dads are working mums and working dads, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I've moved towards it being encompassing for dads as well, because I don't think I think there's almost a danger of just focusing on mums sometimes, and just assuming that they're going to be the ones coming along, when there's more and more dads working from home as well. So definitely want to include them. And I think our sort of new generation of parents coming through are just not accepting the fact that the workplace has not been supportive of parents. It's crazy. I think the figure is something like 86% of people will become parents at some point. So I think we just need to support each other when you're going through those quite tough early years. And I'm not saying that it necessarily gets easier, but I guess we just learn to deal with it a bit more, bit better as we go along. I think just I was actually inspired to start this by Anna Whitehouse, who's known as Mother Pucker on Instagram, because she talks a lot about flexible working and it just being something that we need to offer people, because basically not flexible working is like battery farm chickens, and flexible working is like free range. And the fact that we have the internet and we have the technology to work flexibly and remotely where possible, we should use it, right?
Absolutely. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Lauren, what are some of the key business lessons that you've learned throughout your life?
Something that I've learned quite recently, I think, is just to have fun. If you're not having fun, if you're not doing what you love, if you're not finding it fun, if you're not, connected to what you do, then do something else. I think there's a danger, especially for our particular generation who've got social media but didn't grow up with it, to get a bit stressed, get burnt out, compare ourselves to others, and always feel like we need to be doing more. I certainly felt like this earlier this year. So I'm not saying that I'm perfect or that I've got the balance right, but I think that's just something I'm learning at the moment, is just to have fun, so that when you look back on things, you can look back and smile and not think, oh my God, that was a really stressful time. That's a big learning for me at the moment.
And when you look back at your career journey today, what are you most proud of?
Most proud of? That's a tricky one for me. I find it hard to blow my own trumpet. I suppose just the fact that I've been able to to run successfully this initial venue for the co-working. When I first started it, it was a bit hit and miss in terms of, how many people would come along. Sometimes I'd have 8 people coming, sometimes 2, sometimes I get no one coming. But like the last few months, it's been, a consistent amount of people, and it's just such a lovely community, and it's a privilege to get to work in the same room as them, really.
Mm-hmm. And what next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I've got, there's lots of stuff planned for next year. So my job before this was working for Skype in distance learning. So connecting teachers around the world with each other so that their students could have like a cultural exchange with each other.
Oh, wow.
And I suppose I want to bring an element of that into what I'm doing now. So I'm going to be launching virtual co-working. So it's basically where you will jump onto a video call. You'll get to sort of introduce yourself to the other people, say what you do. There'll be, just the normal sort of things you do when you're co-working. You'll be able to ask questions if you're having anything you're struggling with, or just a chance to sort of get to know other people. And then there'll be a time where we basically set a timer and say, right, you've got one thing, we've always got one thing that's on our to-do list that we keep putting off. So come to a co-working session, get that thing done, because you're going to say what you're going to do, and we're going to hold you accountable. So that's sort of virtual co-working. There's this really cool software that will be basically creating like a virtual office space for us that you'll be able to log into. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
That sounds super exciting, because that for me brings not only the community element that you've already alluded to throughout this conversation, but then the accountability side of community, which is just super powerful.
Yeah. So I think, you can come along to co-working and you can maybe feel like, I didn't get a lot done, but I think the energy that you get sees you through for the week, and then you have a much more productive week. And I think, the accountability in terms of if you've got a virtual office you can log into, if you come into the in-person co-working one day, and then you can log into the virtual space another day, and you don't even have to leave home. If you don't have childcare, or if you've got a young baby, then I think, it could just help support people in doing what they want to do.
Absolutely. As we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick-fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So, Lauren, What do you do to relax outside of the office?
Well, I try and do yoga when I can.
All right.
It always happens more in the summer when you've got light mornings, but yoga is my go-to. Reading. I love going for what I call like micro adventures. So you just go somewhere for the weekend, somewhere new. It doesn't have to be anywhere super exciting, but just a change of scenery. I love doing that.
Excellent. And are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
So if you're like a new mom or a new parent, I would say Parenting the Shit Out of Life. I don't know if I can say that, or if you need to edit it.
You can say anything you want.
Parenting the Shit Out of Life by Anna Whitehouse, and The Fifth Trimester. Those are really good books if you're in that sort of new parent, oh my God, I've got a newborn, what am I doing kind of thing. And then other ones that I found good recently. By the way, I prepared this list because I thought you might ask it. I don't ever normally, you can remember otherwise. The Entrepreneur Revolution by Daniel Priestley is really good if you're thinking of starting your own business. The Multi-Hyphen Method by Emma Gannon, if you're thinking of doing a few different things, whether you want to do a bit of photography, a bit of design work, and sort of on the side do something else. It's all about having multiple different streams of income, I suppose. Mum Boss by Vicky Zarias is a good one if you're thinking of starting something as well.
Oh, excellent. That's a great list. Thank you for that. And are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Sticking on the sort of mum parenting theme, I'd say Motherland on BBC is pretty funny and captures a lot of parent life very accurately, and especially one of the ladies on it who works from home, definitely they got that really well. The Letdown is another one that's about being a new parent, that's set in Australia, but it's definitely lot of the same things here. Moving away from the parenting theme, I find Big Little Lies. I really enjoyed watching that.
Best soundtrack of any TV show ever.
Yeah, oh, definitely, yeah. And of course, Stranger Things. I mean, having grown up, I was born in 1983, so I do remember the 80s. But yeah, I love a bit of 1980s style.
Fantastic. Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
Sure. So my main platform, I suppose, that I'm on is Instagram, and I am on there as @mumming_club. I am on Twitter, but not very much. And the website is mumming.org.
And for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure I link up to those resources on the show notes. Great. Lauren, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.